Jay Gosselin, welcome to Competencies Without a Classroom. Man, we're pumped to have you here, and you know this very well, but middle school, high school students and their teachers, these are busy individuals. So on this podcast, we like to jump right into it, no fluff. I ask every guest the same question. It's probably the most important question I'm going to ask you today. It also helps to set a bit of a tone for the rest of the interview. So with that, Jay, when it comes to pineapple on pizza, are you a yes or a no on that one?
It's a big no for me, Damien. Big time no. Yeah, I just can't wrap my head around it.
Okay, that's fair. Everyone is entitled to their opinion. We're just getting started, so you have some work to do, but you have lots of time to win our listeners back over. On that note, Jay, I can't introduce you better than you can introduce yourself. So who is Jay Gosselin and what are you doing for work right now?
Yeah, thanks, Damien. First of all, thanks for inviting me. It's really nice to chat with you. And so I do a lot of things. And right now, for the last 6 years, I've been the founder of a company called Mentor You, and it's a career and leadership development company. So we focus largely on what people tend to call soft skills, human skills, transferable skills, interpersonal skills. So I do a lot of that work with students and with professionals. We do really exciting team building and leadership training for corporate groups.
Yeah.
And then what I usually call my baby, or it's about 100 of us it's our baby because there's about 100 volunteers and staff. But Discovery Year is a purposeful gap year program that I founded 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So that takes up a good amount of my time as well.
Okay, that's awesome. And hopefully we're going to dig into both of those a little bit more as we continue to talk. But how does that start, Jay? Did you just wake up one day as an 18-year-old saying, I want to help young people, or I want to help professionals develop these skills? What was that moment for? And, those can be separate answers, right? Discover You and Mentor You. But if I'm a high school student listening to this, trying to figure out my path after high school, after grade 12, can you speak to yours a little bit and kind of what that journey looked like for you?
Yeah, I think what's most interesting to me is that, so I started this company and Discover Year specifically because I met 12,000 high school students. I traveled across Canada. I worked at a university. I was liaising, at all the college fairs. I met 12,000 students. I was totally heartbroken. It was just baffling to me how stressed people were, how overwhelmed, how anxious they were about life after high school. And I just couldn't stop thinking about how different it was for me, and certainly for me and for most of my friends. And of course there's trepidation, right? It's a whole new world. We're leaving the nest, all that kind of stuff. But it was far more exciting than it was anxiety provoking for most people, I believe. Right. So that's really what kickstarted that, in combination with many years of trying a whole bunch of different stuff. I worked on cruise ships. I worked at the Vancouver Olympics in 2010. I traveled quite a bit. And then I worked at a university. So that's a long answer, but when I was 18, I had no idea. And importantly, I didn't actually think about it at all. I didn't really care. I was not there yet. And I think that's, to be honest, for many people, a better place to be, to have no idea and not be concerned about that.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. Hopefully that if you're listening, you take away, don't feel the pressure to rush into it. Jay had many life experiences that led him to finally having enough research and enough conversations with individuals to figure out that there's a real need here. I can solve a real problem, and then kind of double down on that, right? So Jay, now that we know a little bit more about you and what's keeping you busy between, we'll call it 9 to 5, what's life look like outside of that 9 to 5? What's 5 to 9 at home right now?
Oh, 5 to 9, I would define as a beautiful grind. And I say that because we've got 2 young kids. The oldest is about to be 3. The youngest is 6 months. And we've been confined in our home since March, most people, intensively, because my wife was pregnant. So it's been eye-opening for sure. It's usually like 5 to 7 is family time and dinner, and usually some theatrics from our toddler. And finally, when we get them down, I do a couple of hours of work in the evening to wrap things up, answer emails and stuff like that. I usually try to read in the evenings. Sometimes I watch a little bit of TV with my wife, and that's it.
Awesome. Let's say 5 years ago, pre-COVID, pre-children, what's a hobby? What's something interesting that you'd love to do if there were no pandemic going on right now?
I'm a big sports guy, so I play a lot of sports. I exercise. That's where I, in fact, have most of my good ideas and my really good thoughts. And that's my kind of place of well-being, is when I get on the bike or go for a swim, go to the gym, play hockey with buddies. So I'm a sports person. I love music. I love to read. So all these books behind me I've read in the last 5 years, really, probably. I don't think I ever completed a book in my entire journey in high school or university. didn't read at all.
Yeah.
Then I fell in love with the topic of psychology and personal development and business. So that's something I love to do, is read and think.
Yeah, that's super interesting. We have that in common. I would describe myself the same way in high school and in post-secondary. I read because I was told to. I was told what to read. So having the ability to choose what you want to read and read it because you chose to read it makes a big difference, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I think it's really funny because I hear so many young people today say, I'm not a reader. And I always catch them and I say, listen, I didn't think I was a reader at your age either. But like you said, it's a combination, I think, of being, certain types of reading being forced on you. And if you, which I think you probably are a little bit, are you a bit on a rebellious side like me? I don't like to do what people tell me to do.
Very much.
So it was important for me to find it. And I think just from a maturity standpoint, I was focused on things that young people are generally focused on.
Yeah.
Not reading.
That's fair. Yeah. Usually, we'll come back to it in the rapid fire questions, but since we're talking about books right now, is there a book that you've read in your adult life that has had such an impact on you that maybe you'd wish you read it before you turned 18?
That's a good question. Definitely many that have had an impact. I'm not sure any. I think I read the books that I don't know if I believe in destiny or not, but I think I read all the important books that I've read at the right time for the right reason. And but the book I would choose to say has had the biggest impact on me recently, at least one of the top few that's relevant to our conversation today, is a book called Range by a sports author named David Epstein. It's actually a book on career development, but the whole premise of the book is that young people should take more time and try more stuff before they decide what they want to do for a longer period of time. And tons of great actual research, scientific research, great anecdotes about, Tiger Woods, who specialized from a very early age, and Pete Sampras, who didn't do, or Roger Federer, sorry, until very late in life, he didn't decide he wanted to be a tennis player.
Right.
So that's the book that I would say is most top of mind.
Okay. Yeah. Super applicable to this conversation. We'll link to it in the show notes. And related to that, I'm going to put you on the spot, Jay, but you just made me think of it because the last guest we had on, her name is Janelle Hines, started an amazing nonprofit called Helping Hands. And one of the things we were going back and forth about were, wishing that it was kind of mandatory at every grade level, at least in high school, that students had to be part of some kind of, whether it's volunteer or work experience, actual experience, right? The experiential part of learning. So if I could, if I had a magic wand and could change anything about the high school curriculum, I would make it so that every student had mandatory experiential learning baked into their year to year. If you had a magic wand, Jay, is there something that you would change about the curriculum knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I would do. And again, like Range is a good example of a book that identifies this, but I would flip the way that young people learn. So rather than telling them what they need to know and then quizzing them on it as an example, I would start by asking them questions about what they think is important, what they think, of course you have to provide a little bit of context. Let's say as an example, World War II, you're in a history class, and rather than telling the students exactly what they need to remember and with their rote memory and memorize, I would maybe have them read a passage and ask them what they think about it. So I was really fortunate to be able to go to a high school in the States, a really nice school in New Hampshire for the end of high school. And we had 10 students in the class, 10 to 12 students around an oak table. And nice. the teachers all had advanced degrees. They were really awesome people, and they would ask us questions. Of course, we had like stuff to read and we had to prove our knowledge, but they would give us the material, then we'd have discussions. And that's largely how we developed Discover Year, because I thought it was so eye-opening for me. And the research shows that's really a great way to do things.
I couldn't agree more, man. And that's actually a great segue to a question we usually come to a little bit later, but it's strong opinions, loosely held. And the reason I want to bring it up now is because a lot of what you just said is why I believe in my strong opinion. So again, a strong opinion, loosely held, is the context that it's something you believe in really strongly, but you're open-minded enough to new information as it becomes available. Maybe it changes your mind. My strong opinion, loosely held, is that grades and tests, they do more harm than they do good. What's yours, Jay?
Well, I first agree. I largely agree with you on that, on your point. Mine is, and I tell this to students all the time, and I think it bears repeating by many people, but I'll premise by saying one of the major challenges I found when I met 12,000 students is that everyone had a 20-year plan. Like either they were shell-shocked and they had no idea, they couldn't articulate anything they were interested in, or when I asked them what they liked, they would ream off a double PhD program. This is a 16, 17-year-old, and they had really no idea what that entailed. And so the thing that I learned is that when I was going into university, most people, with the exception of people who were kind of told they would be doctors or lawyers or accountants, most people were like, I'm going to go get a degree and see what happens. I'm going to learn stuff, I'm going to meet people.
Yeah.
And that's I think the most important for young people today for me is to really understand that you absolutely don't have to have all the answers. And in fact, it's probably almost better that you don't, because statistics show 90% of people when they're 17 have changed ideas or pathways by the time they're 25.
Yeah.
It's a 10,000 person study in Canada, right? So the evidence is clear, people change, but young people I find today are clinging to, they have a desperate need for certainty, which doesn't exist.
Not only do people's minds change, I mean, that's a great point, but the world is changing. Jobs are changing. There's going to be careers and opportunities available in a few years that you don't even know about right now, right? So to that point, don't be beholden to something at 16 or 17. Go out there, get that experience, meet the 12,000 students, and then figure out there's a need and build something from that, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Jay, are you personally on Instagram?
Personally, no.
Oh, okay.
We are not, but Discover Year is.
Yeah. What's the handle? For everyone listening?
It's at Discover Year.
Okay, perfect. And we'll link to it again. Main reason I ask, I love Instagram. It's a love-hate relationship. I personally do have an account. I've deleted it from my phone. I was using it too often for the wrong reasons. It became a time suck. And my biggest issue with Instagram is that it often becomes a highlight reel, kind of people showcasing their best of, right? And that's not reality. So I like to usually use this question as a segue to talk about the opposite of that, a failure. What's a failure you've had, Jay, whether personally or professionally in the last few years that you can speak to that you think would be important for the young people listening to this to hear about?
Oh, so many. The failure that I think is maybe most relevant for young people listening to this, when I was 16, I guess, when I was younger, I played competitive hockey and I lived around Montreal, and I was trying out for midget AAA, which is the kind of the creme de la creme of that age.
Sure. Yeah.
Before you go into junior hockey. And I desperately, it's the only thing in my life I actually ever cared about. And I was trying out for this team, the local team, and I was the last person cut. Last day of tryouts, last exhibition game, I was the last person cut.
Yeah.
And it was just heart-wrenching. And I know it's super privileged to say that was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I totally understand that. But in the moment, it just felt terrible. And my dad was so angry and so sad for me and all the stuff that comes with that.
Yeah.
And then I got home, and the short story is another team in the league, other teams could ask you to try out if you got cut from another team. So the team near Ottawa in Gatineau, they called an hour after I got home and they said, "Hey, can you try out for us?" And my dad said, "You should do it." And I said, "Those guys are the enemies, dude. Like, what are you thinking? I could never play for them."
Yeah.
Anyways, long story short, I made the team. I made the all-star team that year. We went farther in the playoffs than the other team that I was cut from. Yeah. I really opened my mind because I had all these prejudices against the guys on this team that I've been playing against forever. Yeah. I thought they were just jerks, but really they were awesome guys and they just wanted to win just like I did. So, and I became fluently bilingual. I learned how to integrate into a new school, like so many lessons. It was like the greatest thing that ever happened to me at that point.
Yeah. And I can't find the words right now to kind of summarize that, but it's, use failure as an opportunity, right? Like it's not the worst thing in the world. It's going to open up new doors for you, and it's never going to be the end all be all, right? So don't dwell on your failures, use them to learn, right?
Absolutely. And I would say so your question is very relevant for us, Damien. We spend in our student programming, especially at Discover Year, we spend a lot of time talking about failures, and we do things like this. Although we have our students, we have panels every week with professionals who do all kinds of really, really interesting stuff. And these are people who were, left at the altar, were depressed for 6 months. They crashed their car and almost died. They all kinds of failures and setbacks and rejections. And it's really cool to watch our students over the span of the year as they meet 100 of these really interesting people. Each time they meet someone, they realize, okay, this actually is true. Failure is good. Okay, you do come out on the other side, because I think that a lot of young people today, I know it's pretty stereotypical, but I do believe that young people don't fail as much, or at least not in the same way as people once did. Yeah. So it's like getting to that, trying to get excited about the fact that you might not succeed is a really important thing.
I believe that. I do think young people are maybe more protected from failing than in previous years, right? It's really cool that's part of your program, right? Because one of the things I love to talk about on this podcast is the fear setting exercise by Tim Ferriss. Have you heard of it before?
Vaguely. Yeah, I know Tim Ferriss. Remind me.
Yeah, I mean, Google it. There's a 13-minute TED Talk, and he basically has this programmatic system that in it's Cole's notes, you label out whatever it is you're going to do. So maybe I want to quit my job or find a new job. You list out all the worst things that could possibly happen. And then you realize they're not that bad. Or even if they do happen, yeah, they're not that bad, right? But those are kind of what if scenarios. So I love the fact that you're actually talking to people where the bad thing did happen and then realize it still really wasn't that bad, or they learned from something and they were able to make something else out of it. So it's amazing that you're talking about that with young people. Right?
Yeah. And that's a basic kind of psychotherapeutic approach is, worst case scenario, what's to limit people's what's known as catastrophization, right? When people unravel and lots of young people today do that, right? So that's a really great technique that anybody can do on their own.
Fantastic. Okay. Jay, probably safe to assume between Mentor You and Discover You, you've been part of a few hiring decisions.
Yes.
Just a few. Yeah. So here's a hypothetical scenario for you. You have two applicants. They're applying for one job and they look identical on paper. You talked about transferable skills. We call them core competencies, 21st century skills, whatever you want to call them. Over the years, what have you learned that's going to separate that one successful candidate from the other one?
So the number one thing is interest. And this comes up in the research too. So interest, and then what I call adaptability, which I can describe a little bit, but interest is number one. So the first thing that I always do is generally I will often try to find volunteers for short-term or part-time places like work for us. And then I can see how interested they really are. Or I'll just kind of put a line in the water and I'll say, hey, Damien, are you interested? Hey, we have this project. It's a little bit of part-time work, or would you like to help us out? Right. And I can see very, very quickly, much better than you could ever in an interview. If someone starts to do work, how do they show up? Are they interested? Are they engaged? Are they curious? Right. All those things. And then of course, all the secondary things about, communication and resilience, all those factors are the next step. But for me, if someone is really, really interested and they have a baseline intellectual capacity, to be honest, that is something that is relevant for most of our work. Yeah. But it certainly doesn't require an advanced degree. A lot of people that I work with don't have any degree, and they're way smarter than people who have multiple degrees. So interest is really, really, really interesting. And that's what we try to impart to our students is that, and I think there's a lot of, follow your passion. That's something that we try to demystify, because passion is pretty intimidating. Yeah. But what we should, I think, downgrade that to for young people is just try to identify, what are you actually interested in? What are the things that you do that you would do for free, or that, not easy, but you find yourself compelled to keep going. Those are the things that I'm looking for, the people who are compelled to keep going with us. So
can we dig in on that a little bit? Is it interest in the organization or interest in the role, or just they have an interest in something and they can communicate that, right? Because one of the things we've talked about on this podcast before, one of the values we have in my blueprint is, wants to be here. So it's pretty easy to tell during the interview process if you've done your homework and you have a genuine interest in working for this company, or if you just hit send to, a blanket 100 companies and you just happen to get this interview, right? So if I'm somebody and let's say I haven't done the volunteer opportunity with you, so I'm just applying for a job, haven't met you before, how do I showcase my interest as part of the interview process?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, something we work on with our students, but things like, so aside from communications, aside from how you package this, it would be things like, hey, I saw the Discover Your website, or I met somebody who was in the program, or wow, this is really interesting or really cool. This is something that I've been seeking out for a while. Yeah. Or I think it's really important that people take time before they jump into, major life decisions. Anything along that line that says to me, okay, this person actually does care. It doesn't necessarily matter exactly how it's written, but there are a certain number of ways that you can demonstrate that you really do care. So, but having done research in the broadest sense, having an understanding of what we do, and somehow showcasing, connecting why you care about that.
Yeah. That, and I would add asking smart questions, right? Or just asking questions, right? Showing that you've done the research and you're curious about why the company or the organization does something a certain way, or that kind of thing, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Jay, what's a life skill that you weren't taught in high school, but that you wish you were?
I can't say that I wasn't taught it in high school, but maybe not as explicitly as I would have liked. I would say listening. And maybe I wouldn't have even been ready for it. But the greatest class I've ever done, the most useful class I've ever done, was when I was studying, which I dropped out of, by the way, but I was studying to do a master's in counseling psychology. And I did most of the courses. One of the courses is called micro counseling, and it's just 3 people, 3 classmates. One person is the interviewer. So it's as if this would be happening right now, and someone would be observing us and would give us feedback after.
Yeah.
And that was so useful. And we integrate that model into everything we do because until that point, I didn't really understand how bad of a listener I was. So that's the thing. I think listening is so vastly underrated in our society. Not underrated, but miscommunicated. People don't understand how important it really is.
Yeah, and I don't think it's prioritized in teaching people how to be good or active listeners, right? Oftentimes, we're just waiting for you to stop talking so we can say the next thing that we want to say. We're not actually listening to the content that's coming out of your mouth. So yeah, it's a huge skill. That and curiosity for me are kind of home runs if you can develop those, right?
Absolutely.
Speaking of curiosity, I'm curious now about these next questions. Let's jump into some rapid fires for you, Jay. So you can write anything on a billboard. Everyone's going to see that billboard. What does it say?
Take action. Go out there, do something, try stuff.
Yeah, you learn from doing, right? We had another guest, I think he said almost the same thing, do over plan, right? So get out there, right? IQ or EQ, you can only pick one. Which one are you picking?
EQ hands down, without a doubt.
Yeah, good answer. You talked about some of your favorite courses in post-secondary. Did you have a favorite high school class?
My favorite high school class, I would say I had, short answer is no. I had favorite teachers. I really connected with some of my teachers and they were awesome. And I enjoyed those classes much more.
Can you give a shout out to one of them? Like who was one teacher that made a big impact?
Yeah, Miss Rogers, she's passed now, but she was at the boarding school I went to. She was amazing. English professor.
This is a tough one for Jay. If I was 18 again, I would. Can you repeat and finish that sentence?
If I was 18 again, I would probably just generally be nicer to people, even though I think on the surface I was pretty nice.
Yeah.
I think I could have done things better.
That's a good answer. Reflecting on myself, I think I'd probably answer the same way. I've always been a very nice person, but I think I'm even more kind and more generous and more empathetic. Maybe that's just something that happens as you get older and you encounter people with different situations and scenarios, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just finished up with a hypothetical scenario for you. So you're the superintendent of a school board. You're tasked with deciding one competency, one transferable skill that every student needs to display evidence of in their digital portfolio in order to graduate. What is that skill?
I think the root is self-awareness. So that's what I would choose.
Okay. Any advice on how a high school student can become more self-aware?
Yeah, I mean, the easy place to start is there are quite a few tools out there, some better than others, self-assessments, questionnaires. I know, I'm sure that my blueprint has some good tools.
Sure.
That though, however, on its own, I find is often not useful enough. I think conversation with people who ideally would kind of understand the realm of career and personality theory, but just discussing it with someone, coming to better understand what your results mean. And the last step I would say is really comparing that with peers or other people. So finding out what their results are. So there's a tool that we use called the VIA character strengths. It comes from positive psychology. And as an example, the character strengths are things like social intelligence, fairness, spirituality, humility, etc., judgment. And so people are really surprised by the fact that these are strengths. They're not surprised that they show up at the top for them. So as an example, mine's social intelligence, but I just always thought people, it's fine. Just talk to people, just go out, say hello. Right. And only pretty late in life that I realized that's something that's really not the norm.
No. Yeah.
So I think it's really helpful for young people to contextualize these things with other people so that they really see what's different about them, what's special, what stands out.
Yeah, I did something to that effect years ago when I was at Ryerson in post-secondary, one of those things where they spit out the 300-page report, and it was super interesting to kind of reflect on, and a lot of it can be pretty accurate. So Jay, let's wrap up by talking a bit more about these two different organizations. I'm a high school student. Let's start with Discover Year. What do you want me to know about Discover Year, and where can I go to learn a bit more about it?
Yeah, Discover Year is it's a one-year program, so it's for high school graduates. It involves working, traveling wherever you want to go in the world for parts of the year. There's a community service project. Each student gets their own coach, and we meet every week. So we're a recognized post-secondary institution by the Government of Canada. Okay. So we meet for full days every Wednesday throughout the year, and we, like I mentioned, we introduce our students to all these really cool mentors. We focus on workshops. So the key competencies largely is what we look at. We help students better plan their lives and their projects, make good decisions, better understand themselves, communicate much more effectively. understand different cultures, plan their own finances, that kind of thing. And we do that once a week for the entire year. So they can go to discoveryour.ca, and admissions are still open until June 1st. So I know there's a lot of people that are waiting on making decisions, especially grade 12 students right now, given the current situation, but they can reach out to us anytime and arrange a chat with our program manager, Julia. And we have an event coming up February 18th is our next info session.
Okay, fantastic. And then Mentor You. Again, young person listening to this, where can I go and what do you want me to know about it?
So Mentor You, the most relevant thing is that we have a digital learning platform. So students can go and there's a number of self-awareness tools, different courses around communication and career and job search, that kind of thing. So it's mentoryou.learnworlds.com, I think is the URL to be precise. And it's a LearnWorlds platform, but that's the most relevant. It's all free. It's open access. So anybody can do any of the courses anytime in their own time.
Fantastic. And we're going to link to all the links and URLs and handles and books that we talked about in the show notes, so everyone can just click on them and get started. So Jay, I can't thank you enough for your time, man. You're making a huge impact in young people's lives. So thank you for everything you do, and have a great day.
Thank you, Damien. Likewise.
Thanks.